Today our topic is going to be tourism and events. So just if you can keep your microphones on mute so we can minimize the amount of noise. And we've got actually 4 people today that are going to do some presentations to give you a really good idea of the various impacts, the various things we should all be thinking of when it comes to tourism and events in our communities. And so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so today, let's see, the tourism sector, as many of you know, it's predicted to be one of the hardest hit by the pandemic. And I saw a statistic just this morning saying Canada's projected it's going to lose millions of dollars in tourism revenue this year. So the entire value chain is going to be affected. And you've already seen that. You've seen airlines do layoffs, WestJet in particular, Air Canada recently, airports, hotels, tour operators, cruise lines, restaurants, conference venues, event organizers, rental companies. Just the whole value chain is being hit. And that's what the topic of our webinar is today. Small and medium enterprises in particular are expected to be particularly hard hit. And it's going to take a very wide range of supports from government, from private sector, from communities to really address this. So today we've got, like I mentioned, 4 great people joining us for this webinar. First, we've got Lynn Knight, and I'll introduce Lynn just before she presents. But Lynn is the EVP of the Institute for Sustainable Development out of Washington, D.C. We've got Shelley Grollmuss, who is the VP of Industry Development for Travel Alberta. We've got Wes Scott, who's President and CEO of EventWorx Corporation. And then actually just about 2 hours ago, I got a confirmation from Jessie State. She's a director of MPI Academy. So that's Meeting Professionals International. She's out of Dallas. So she's going to be joining us for that 4th piece. And then Nancy, once again, for those of you who've been on before, Nancy will be curating questions. And so if you do have questions, please send a question in the chat box, and we'll try and have time at the end to answer some of your pressing questions. So before, so Lynn Knight, as I mentioned, Lynn is the Executive Vice President of Institute for Sustainable Development. I've known Lynn for a number of years. She actually ran the Restore Your Economy group at the International Economic Development Council, so IEDC. And she has worked on a number of different recovery projects across the US and internationally. And Lynn's going to introduce herself a little more formally, because one of the reasons I really wanted Lynn to be on is she has such a global perspective and a deep perspective on tourism, given her experience. So Lynn, if you're able to unmute yourself, I will get to your first slide, but go ahead and start your presentation.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you, Leanne, for inviting me to participate. You know, when you say tourism, I tend to jump, you know, I'm an economic developer, but I have deep experience in tourism. I've managed hotels. I was on a governor's tourism task force. I've set up tourism dashboards. I was really honored to have the opportunity to study tourism economics under one of America's foremost tourism economists at George Washington University. And I've also studied tourism product development and tourism master planning abroad. I have done tourism master plans in small and large communities, and have also worked in tourism through many crises. So, you know, the first thing I want to talk about is a little bit about tourism economics, because people tend to think of just, you know, hotels and restaurants and tour agents, but they really don't think about all the myriad of companies that go into supporting this sector. So I think it's always important to kind of keep in mind, it's so much bigger than you think. And Leanne, on your slide where you talk about, you know, potentially millions of dollars of losses in Canada, I'm sure it's going to be billions because of all the multiplier effects. So this is this is a demonstration of some of the types of businesses that go into the tourism industry that can be impacted. Definitely banks and many of the others. Next slide. This is a study from a community I used to live in, where I chaired the hotel association. And those numbers up above, 1, 2, 3, 4, represent tourists from different countries that we studied the characteristics of, you know, how long they stayed, how many people came, and what they typically spent. So as you could see, just among different types of tourists, there's average expenditures can vary pretty widely. The income multiplier is very high in this community, which meant that, you know, for every dollar spent by a tourist, $2.1 were spent in the community, either directly or through the multipliers of other businesses. And employment was also extremely high, 1.79 jobs for every job in tourism. So if you think about that, you know, the impact starts to go up pretty quickly. Next slide. So, you know, one of the things I think about whenever there's a downturn, I mean, oftentimes we're talking to tourist destinations after they've had a natural disaster. The disaster is already over and everybody can move on and it's time to restart. Right now, though, we don't know when this disaster is going to end. I suspect it could go on for quite a while, and this is a really good time for us to think through what this sector means to our community and what we can do to make it better when it does restart. So I like to show this slide so that you can think very realistically about your competitiveness as a tourism destination. This is an international competitiveness index that's put together by the World Economic Forum. And it's, you know, during the downturn, it's a good time to reevaluate where you are and look at your plans and see if you can improve on any of these measures. So, you know, obviously businesses are affected by policies, regulations. You know, it might be the case that you want to loosen some things up so that when things reopen there, it's easier. I would think through all of these measures. Obviously natural and cultural resources, the environment, transportation, safety and security, all kinds of other things, your competitiveness and prices. I suspect that when destinations can reopen, there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand for people that want to travel, that are just dying to get out and go somewhere. Why would they pick your community? Do you have the right competitiveness and the things that they would expect in tourism infrastructure? Next slide. So here's just a few things you can do now, and I'm going to end with this so that I can let other people talk and then have time for questions later. I think the very first thing you should do now is start talking to your businesses. If you don't have a formal survey going, I would start one right now so you know exactly what they're going through, and very importantly, what their ideas are. That's why I like to include open-ended questions. It takes a little bit more time to tally, but oftentimes the best ideas come from your own businesses if you give them a chance to speak up about what they would like to see different, what it is that they need to get through this time, any good ideas they have for how to promote the destination once you start up again. They give them an opportunity to give a lot of input. Another thing that's good to do during a downturn is workforce training. And I think this will have to be online because of, you know, we can't have people getting together, but I'll always remember I was at the 4th United Nations Conference on Least Developed Nations, and I had the really good fortune of being on the panel with a woman who was executive director of the Hotel Association for Egypt. And it was right after Arab Spring, and they had about 200,000 people working in hotels alone that were closed because of that, because of the protests. And she gave a really inspiring talk about how they were going to use the time to better train their workers, train them in languages, customer service, revenue management programs, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that was really good, not just because it was good for the workers, but it also helped keep them from basically leaving the industry for good. You know, they felt good about the fact that the industry was putting on some training that they could get for free that would keep them involved and engaged and feeling appreciated. Another thing, third on my list, is business case management. There are some businesses, particularly small ones, and you can identify them in the survey, that are going to need help. And the help might be, you know, they may need finance. I think everybody's going to need finance, but they might also welcome help redoing their business plan. You know, maybe they realize that when they open, they want to do things a little bit differently, or sharpening up their marketing plan. Or even preparing their financial statements to get loans. That is something that you can help small businesses with. Creative financing. There are all kinds of different ways to help small businesses. I could give a whole workshop on this alone, but I did a study across the nation on what are some of the best ways to help small businesses recover after a crisis. And, you know, they range from microloans, forgivable loans. Forgivable loans, in some cases, you know, you give a loan for a year, and if the business is still reopened and still employing people, they don't have to pay it back. I've seen that done. Small grants are becoming more and more, we're seeing some of those where previously it was only, the businesses could only get loans. Now they're starting to get little grants to help them stay alive and get them through. For the businesses that can do it, those that have the means, now is a great time to do renovations and improvements. A year ago, we were working, or actually for the last 9 months, we've been working on the disaster recovery plan for the Kilauea volcano. And I interviewed a number of hotels that said that, you know, when the volcano was going off and their occupancy was going down to like 20%, it just wasn't even worth keeping all the rooms open. But what they could do is use that time to do renovations, so that when they had the opportunity to get tourists again, they could open stronger and more attractively. And then finally, but definitely not last, is to start planning the promotions. You know, when you're reopening, are you just going to leave it up to businesses to do this all on their own? Or do you want to do a whole destination promotion and jumpstart this through special events, maybe even some new branding, and some advertising to promote your destination? So now is a great time to plan all that. All right, Leanne, thank you, and I'll be back for questions later.
That's awesome, Lynn. Thank you so much. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions for you. Thank you for highlighting some of those things. We're going to turn over to now Shelley Grollmuss. Now, Shelley's VP of Industry Development at Travel Alberta. So I know, Shelley, you're very familiar with our organization for a number of years, and maybe I think it's better that you introduce yourself, because I'm probably going to miss something important. All I do know is that you're a great supporter of economic development and tourism in this province, and so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Leanne, and good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and talk about tourism and the impact that obviously this global situation is having on all of our industry and our operators. So we know, just as you, that the situation, and maybe, Leanne, we could go to the first slide.
That is the first one I got. This one?
Yeah, sorry, then, yeah, perfect. So myself, with Travel Alberta, working with our industry team, we have a team that spans right across the province. that works with different communities and tourism businesses to help support the various needs in tourism development and promotion. And we're outreaching regularly to find out what's going on in our industry. So I wanted to share just a few highlights with you today. We know that the situation continues to evolve rapidly and significantly, and is changing all the time. And different parts of the province are feeling this in different ways. Of course, the government on March 27th placed some further restrictions on non-essential business operations, now limiting things to mass gatherings of no more than 15 people. We know that it's difficult for businesses to kind of keep up, especially our small and medium-sized businesses in the province that represent probably about 99% of the businesses that we have in the tourism industry. But certainly from the Rockies to our rural communities and all sectors across our province are being affected by this. Big or small businesses, doesn't matter, as you know. Operators are feeling a tremendous sense of uncertainty right now. I think that we're all looking for answers. We're wondering what the future may hold, and we're wondering when things can come back online. Certainly within the tourism industry, we've seen widespread layoffs in a variety of different areas, whether it's through the airlines and the hotels, sort of what Leanne had mentioned earlier, food and beverages with restaurants being impacted. Our tourism experience providers, like our museums and attractions, have been significantly impacted, as well as our sort of local destination marketing organizations, which are the Tourism Calgary's, Edmonton Tourism, Grand Prairie Regional Tourism, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, certainly Banff, Lake Louise, etc. The list goes on of those organizations throughout the province. So for us, we are seeing kind of the complete collapse of our tourism ecosystem and sector right now in the province, and of course globally as we're seeing that. And the biggest probably concern right now for a lot of the businesses out there is really cash flow and liquidity at this time. We have really taken on the role of trying to be a communicator and a connector in sharing information back up with our ministry colleagues in economic development, trade and tourism, as well as sharing information with our industry partners. And maybe Leanne, we could move on to the next slide, which talks a little bit more about Travel Alberta's industry support to date. And I want to talk about a few different things here. So as I mentioned, our partners, or we continue to outreach to our partners to kind of touch base and find out how their business is being impacted. And even sometimes at this point, it's lending that empathetic ear to understand what's going on with their business or in their particular community, and making sure that wherever possible, we can direct them to resources where we may be familiar with certain government programs, or to our own industry website, industry.travelalberta.com, where we are providing regular updates, daily updates on the website, and we are doing a weekly Connections e-newsletter now out to all of our subscribers. As I mentioned, businesses are being impacted by their cash flow during this economic shutdown, and we're trying to come up with solutions and figure out government programs that are available to support them. On the Travel Alberta side, we have suspended all of our marketing activities, campaigns globally. Of course, it's not the time to do any marketing out there to encourage travel and visitation. We are working very closely with the government's communication team, and actually we're fulfilling a little bit of a different role right now than we have in the past. And we're starting to do some communications on behalf of the government of Alberta. We worked very closely with them on what was called the Snowbird campaign, in really getting the message out to Canadians that were, Albertans and Canadians actually, that were still in the United States or overseas in different parts of Canada, to come back home, to return home right away, and to do the required self-isolation. So we worked with all of our distribution channels to help get that message out there, as well as supportive creative for the government of Alberta. And right now, we're continuing to support a brand new campaign that launched just yesterday. It's called Stay Home and Stay Healthy. It's a message that we're trying to encourage people to follow those directions, to stay home and help stop the spread of the virus. it's the most important thing we can do right now. So we're really trying to align with the government of Alberta's messaging and support them in that direction, and trying to convey that through all of our distribution channels, as well as we'll be running advertisements through television, radio, print, on digital, and you'll also see it in social media. So that's our immediate focus right now. Of course, we do have team members that are working kind of on that rebuild phase when we get there, in terms of what a future destination promotion campaign could look like, further to Lynn's comment about thinking about further out destination promotion. So we're focused right now on the short term and what we need to do, but we're also putting some ideas and thoughts around long term, what destination promotions could look like when the time is right to get people traveling, shopping local, buying local, and how do we build those campaigns back out. We're also looking at doing some industry webinars here that we'll have some announcements around shortly to really help our industry partners as they work through the various phases to try to rebuild some of their businesses. So if we could move to the next slide, Leanne, that would be great. Because I'd like to just talk about some general support and things that are happening in the industry. We have a variety of industry associations out there, as I'm sure many of you may be aware of, from our hotel associations of Canada, locally the Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association. We have a provincial advocacy group called the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. There are national groups at the level, our Tourism Industry Association of Canada, of course, Business Council of Canada. There's a variety of them that have all been out advocating for the support of our industry, which is greatly appreciated, and getting that voice out there and encouraging support federally and provincially for tourism to help our industry get back on track. We know that all of our provincial and federal governments are working really hard to create the appropriate policies and programs to help support communities and businesses. There's been a lot of recent announcements, including the federal wage subsidy, which I think is important for all of us, that now applies to any business or nonprofit organization that's seen a drop of 30% in revenue or more. That was a really great announcement that's come out. There was also the government of Alberta announcement allowing hotels that are currently paying into the tourism levy in Alberta to defer payments to August 31st. We've seen rent deferrals put in place for our airports in Calgary and Edmonton, and the funds that they provide to the government of Canada, and deferring that until December 2020. And of course, announcements by Parks Canada deferring commercial lease payments until September. There's been so many different announcements. And I know Leanne, I'm sure, keeps you up to speed on some of these announcements, as well as we have them listed on our industry website as well. I think one of the greatest challenges we all face right now is just disseminating all of the information that's out there, ensuring that we're providing what we need going forward. And yes, Leanne, we can move to the next slide, which is really about focusing and looking ahead at the future. So right now, we very much are still in the respond to the crisis phase and trying to think about what the future may hold. We need to keep in mind that our tourism industry has been incredibly resilient in the past through different crises that we've seen. Of course, we've never seen something to this magnitude. So I think we're all trying to think a little bit differently on how we do things differently and prepare ourselves for what the future may hold. And we're working very hard with the government of Alberta to help continue to move through a brand new 10-year tourism strategy that was created earlier this winter. It's something that many of you may have participated in the creation and formation through stakeholder sessions that we held across the province. So that 10-year tourism strategy that was put together as an all-of-government strategy is continuing to move through the processes of government, and we are hoping that it will go through to Cabinet sometime in April. And I think it's really important that we see this new strategy as a catalyst for our industry and helping to elevate and profile our industry as an economic contributor to the province. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that moves through government. And I think for us, we want to make sure that any future funding programs that we have, I know some of you may be familiar with our previous cooperative marketing program. We're looking at potentially how we can repurpose some of those funds to help our businesses rebuild for the future. And we'll have more information coming out about that shortly. And I just want to leave you with the fact that we are actively planning for the future. So Travel Alberta is here for all of our tourism businesses and partners right now. We are looking ahead to the future. We will get through this together if we work together. When it's safe and appropriate, we will start marketing again. But the most important thing for us right now is to respond to the needs of our partners and think about starting to rebuild and welcome travelers back to the province when we're all collectively ready. So thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to any questions that there may be later on as well. And thank you, Leanne.
Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate all the work you're doing. And for those on the line, obviously, with the tourism industry, I think it's nice to know that, you know, you're looking ahead, you're thinking positively, and doing what you can do. I mean, we will be resilient. So next, I want to introduce Wes Scott. Wes, actually, I know you're even a sponsor at our conference in November, but Wes does a lot of international conferences, organizing them. And I think for a lot of you, whether it's a small festival in your community or an annual event, a lot of us have had to cancel events, and that means yet another hit to the local business community. So I wanted the next two presentations to focus a little more on that event piece and what it means, but also what we can do to help support those businesses that are involved in this industry. So Wes, if you want to take over, that's great.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate, Leanne. Much appreciated. If we can just go to the next slide, that'd be great, please. Oh, I guess we can go to the next one. Thank you. So, you know, to support what, you know, Shelley was saying a few minutes ago, this morning, I found a report from Tourism Economics of the US, and they are predicting that the total economic loss in the United States from tourism is $809 billion, 6 times worse than post 9/11, and they're predicting 4.6 million jobs being lost in the tourism sector in the US. I couldn't find similar ones on the Canadian one, but I thought I would just share that as an interesting statistic as I was, you know, looking for stuff on the events side. You know, since March to May, the number of events that have been canceled has already been significant. On the US side, you know, obviously a much bigger events industry. I think it's interesting to note that in just 2 months, show organizers have lost between $2.3 billion and $3.6 billion. According to the Center for Exhibition Research, the total loss to the economies is between 14 billion and 22 billion. On the Canadian side, it's obviously a lot smaller. However, you know, the only survey I could find currently is one being done by ShowPass. And I actually think this is probably very, very modest numbers of 52 million in lost revenues so far. And certainly on the events layoff side, I think that's probably low, because I suspect that we're not, you know, getting numbers from organizations like a Stampede Park or TELUS Convention Center. You know, this is event organizers, could be exhibitions, conferences, special events, festivals, that sort of thing. So you can certainly start to understand the magnitude of, you know, what events bring to economies. If we can go to the next slide, please, Leanne. You know, just before we move on, one of the things, you know, my background was running DMG events for many years, and having the opportunity to work on the Global Petroleum Show when it was, you know, truly the world's largest oil and gas event. And one of the things that we had done was the economic impact study for it when it was the largest. And at that time, in 2012, the economic impact to the city of Calgary for that 3-day event was $170 million. So you can start to understand, again, just, you know, how big the numbers are to hotels, restaurants, taxi cabs, you know, local businesses. I thought instead of focusing too much on the negative, I would speak to a little bit how we're seeing the event industry all around the world actually start to come together and try to be an asset to help with this pandemic. So some of the things that we're seeing, organizations like the TELUS Convention Center are preparing to house homeless, and they're bringing in their show decorator to help them with that sort of thing. I saw that Sprung Structures has built a hospital, and that's been shipped to Ontario. I suspect that there's some other good examples happening, and I think this is a really good opportunity for communities to look at their events industry, their buildings, their venues, and that sort of thing, and say, okay, in the short term, is there anything we can be doing to help with the planning if this gets worse, and get some of these people out there working and get the venue set up, and I guess be prepared if it gets worse. On the other side of that, we're trying to explore as a company, what we can do to try and support our customers. So I actually have a call at 2 o'clock today with my team again to brainstorm. So one of the things right now that we're trying to do, which wasn't innovative at all, but it costs us nothing to do, and that is to share information, whether it be white papers, case studies, technology briefs, videos from our exhibitor base, the people that buy our exhibit space at our different events around Canada, and share that with the intended audience. So we're going to do these on every one of our events where our paid exhibitors can send us whatever materials they'll have, and then we'll get it out to their potential customers, and just try to keep that dialogue moving. And we're not asking for money on this. It's just some added value. What we want to do is start to explore what else we can be doing, on that front. And, I think one of the things that I wanted to chat with this audience about is sort of the longer term, how important events are, and is there an opportunity to make sure that you're working with whether it be festival organizers, event organizers, meeting planners, whoever it is within your community that build events, to help them make sure that they get rescheduled, not just canceled. Cancellation is devastation. It means that we don't have that money to go on. If you can at least reschedule it, your customers will typically work with you, let us hang on to their deposits, sponsorships, and that sort of thing. But if they get canceled, we have to give all that money back, and then we're laying people off. So, if we can get them rescheduled in the short term, that helps. Long term is, we've always viewed events as economic development drivers. And if there's an opportunity for economic development agencies or tourism boards to brainstorm with community about what new events can be brought forward as quickly as possible. It gets venues booked up again, it gets hotels booked again, it gets people back to work. It gives people a sense of community and builds that community morale. Hopefully it starts to bring new people back to a community. And of course, there's that economic impact to the community. So I think, from that side, I really encourage organizations to start brainstorming. And I'd be happy to jump on any call. I can even get members of my own team to help. Any sort of event that you can start to put on in the long term, that will get all of these organizations back to work, get business flowing. One of the things that I wrote down was small business expos. As an economic development agency, I bet a lot of you already do local town events, like trade shows. How many of those can you put on to try and get those businesses back out there and keep it low cost to them? so that they can get back out in front of their customers and start marketing. If they're not having the money to pay their bills, they're certainly not going to have money to spend on marketing. So how can agencies help them out with that sort of thing? One of the things I wanted to try and do, and maybe we can do this through the chat, is really brainstorm a little bit. And I'd love to collect ideas how we as a business, you as agencies, can help support businesses now. You know, what are the things that we can do short term to help them market and try and get their products and services back in front of their customers, even when they can't be face to face and their doors are shut. So, you know, I'd love to have some dialogue on that. It'll certainly help my call at 2 o'clock. I think I only had one more slide. Actually, I guess I sort of talked through my slides. That was my challenge. So I give you that challenge to think about, and hopefully we can collectively come up with some ideas to share. I'll roll it back to you, Leanne.
Thanks, Wes. And what I've liked hearing from you, Shelley and Lynn, is, you know, I mean, tourism operators, people in the tourism industry, customer focused. They truly are. They're multilingual, some of them. They understand how to host people and how to put on events. And so helping them understand that that skill set is valuable no matter what, and repurposing that. I love that. And so, you know, I encourage all of the people on the call, you know, to be working with your community and those tourism operators to think about how can we repurpose what you have, because it's something very special, and make something of it now and in the future. Jessie, I hope you're on the line.
Hi.
Jessie is with Meeting Professionals International, and it's a good, this is a group, a professional association. Maybe Jessie, you can speak a little more to it, but just for you to speak a little to the topic as well, because you have meeting planners from around the world that belong to your association, and maybe just what you're seeing and maybe some best practices that you're coming upon. So feel free to take it away. You're on mute.
Yep. So I was on mute until you're done, and then I'll step up. But thank you so much for inviting me today. So I'm with Meeting Professionals International. We are the largest association for people that plan meetings and for people that support meetings and events. So we've got over 17,000 members around the world, globally. We have we have I think 7 different chapters in Canada. And meetings are really big business. When we look at the totality of conferences, trade shows, events, festivals, we're talking about $1 trillion a year global business. And within Canada, that is a $33 billion business that supports over 200,000 jobs. And when we take a look at the impact that this is having on that business, it begins to ramp up a lot. But what we also know is that our business is part of the recovery, and it's going to fuel business moving through the summer and into the fall. In fact, I think that where you're seeing struggles now with those events canceling or actually postponing, they're not canceling. And the challenge for all of our businesses come when this recovery begins, which hopefully it does begin soon, is that you're going to have meetings that have been postponed, and there's going to be a capacity problem on the other side. So as you're looking at all of these meetings that are being pushed into those fall months, there's going to be challenges with scale for some of your properties. There's going to be venues that are looking to create partnerships with different meetings and events that can be held concurrently together. You're going to be asked and tasked as a destination to really look at, are there alternative venues that aren't typically purposed for these types of experiences, and how can you accommodate the incoming flux of all of these postponed meetings and events when it comes to that recovery process. So I think that while we're all struggling right now, on the other side, there's going to be a lot of business that needs to get done for a lot of organizations that are looking to not lose the money, both on the destination and venue side, but also for the organizer perspective. How do we keep this in the fiscal year? Those are all questions that people are asking. And so it's just something to really consider. And I know that marketing budgets right now are nil. A lot of organizations are experiencing triage right now as they're trying to just save jobs during this time. But this is a really, really great opportunity for you to reach out to your clients and just ask them how they're doing. Reach out to those lists of people and just have a human touch and send an email to people and just say, how are you doing? How can I support you right now? Here are some resources that I've compiled that are available to you to help you during this time. From the MPI perspective, we have opened up all of our online digital recorded learning to members and non-members for free. So for the next couple of months, you don't need to be an MPI member to access our recorded education. All of our webinars upcoming through the end of August are free to anybody to attend. These are the types of resources you can be sharing with your clients, any prospects that you have, anyone who's part of your business family. Compile a list of resources that are out there that are going to help them, and reach out with, not with that sale, but reach out with that empathy, with the, I'm going through it too. I know what this is like. I'm your partner, I'm your trusted friend in this industry, and we're gonna pull through this together. Here's some resources that I found that are available to you. So that's some of the things that you can be working on even while those marketing budgets are being cut. There's still that human element of reaching out and letting people know that you're there for them. So that's some of the things that we're looking at as part of our overarching industry community on the business event side. We have an organization called Meetings Means Business. That is an international organization. There's also Meetings Mean Business Canada. They are working directly with legislators to ensure that our industry has the safety net that it needs to bounce back quickly. And I wanted you to know that on the business event side, those conversations are happening with Parliament and with your country's leaders. So I think that as all industries band together to ensure that we are represented when the conversations are happening relative to relief, that our business side, the business side, is also doing that. I think that's, I didn't have any slides that I wanted to share. I was just appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you, to let you know that we already see the other side. We're working towards that recovery. Business events, the business event sector and the festival sector, the concert sector, all of those are part of the recovery. We're going to be a vital industry that's part of the economic recovery of the global, the global economy. And it's just, can we get through these hard moments right now?
Jessie, that was awesome. Got to tell you, I watch the news, it gets so depressing, and yet to be able to talk about the future and what could be is much more energizing. So thank you very much. Yeah. Each of you will have, if you want to download this slide deck after, it will be uploaded to our website, so you can get all of these websites for our presenters today. I know Shelley, you wanted to try to unmute you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to it that I think right now is a really important time to scenario plan. So everyone's talking about, looking at your business plans, looking at your marketing plans, etc. But it's a really important time to scenario plan, because there's a number of different scenarios that could play out. And we're also suggesting that look at the tactics or plans that you have based and actually let them be guided by sort of the level of travel restrictions that are out there. So you're going to see the world come back in different stages. Right now, Australia came out and said, no international travel for 6 months. Different countries are going to put different restrictions in place, even between the Canada-US border. It's really important that we think about tourism in the span of local, and we help local right away, and then sort of let the travel restrictions help guide sort of the process of where you're going to market and what you're going to do next. And another group had shared with me something that I just wanted to share with you guys, maybe to wrap up some of this, because I thought it was so appropriate. But they said, be human, be strong, be creative. We all need to think differently and innovate right now, and be proactive.
Well, so we're going to wrap up then. Thank you again, Lynn, Shelley, Wes, Jessie, for being on today. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we will be uploading the video. So recording, if you want to share it with anyone else who you think should have heard the content today. We'll have the slide deck so you can have all of the websites for everyone. And thank you again. Our next webinar is next Wednesday at noon, and the topic is actually on retail. So we'll have some interesting conversation around retail and how this is affecting retailers. So thanks again. Have a good week, and we'll see hopefully most of you back next week. Bye-bye.